The introduction positions prophecy not as a relic of the past, but as a dormant message designed to surface precisely when the world becomes capable or desperate enough to decode it. It speaks to the idea that history contains hidden cycles where warnings are timed like seeds, buried in language until they are unearthed by a generation with matching chaos and curiosity. The voiceover frames Nostradamus as a traveler between eras, a man whose quatrains are not only poetic observations, but encrypted signals carrying intent, observation, and consequence. The opening seconds emphasize survival beyond institutions, declaring that his words outlived monarchies, empires, and belief systems precisely because they were not anchored to one power, one nation, or one creed. Instead, they are presented as trans-historical commentary on human behavior, moments when geopolitics, psychology, nature, and technology collide. The modern era is portrayed as uniquely exposed to this resurfacing due to its hyperconnectivity, tension between global powers, spiritual uncertainty, and a technological revolution advancing faster than collective wisdom. The statement, "An ancient whisper returns as a warning," creates a tone that is both mystical and urgent. It implies that we are not reading prophecy, but being addressed by it. The 2026 is not a guessed date, but a critical convergence window. The intro subtly challenges conventional scholarship by hinting at forbidden verses, avoided interpretations, and suppressed research threads, suggesting that the mainstream has historically engaged with Nostradamus only on safe ground, leaving the darkest or clearest warnings untouched. This primes the audience to view the prophecies as mirrors rather than mysteries, psychological checkpoints rather than distant fantasy. By framing Nostradamus as a voice built for this exact threshold of civilization, the introduction invites a new question. Not what he predicted, but whether the present world is finally reflecting what he saw. The surprise lies in the implication that humanity has matured into the era his coded anxieties warned about, where climate extremes, maritime power struggles, economic idolization, and emerging AI dominance begin to resemble foretold consequences, not fate, but a future shaped by collective blind spots. The video deliberately opens like an initiation, not a presentation. The narrator does not immediately deliver prophecy, but first engineers the psychological posture required to receive it. This preparation is strategic. Viewers are told that they are about to enter a territory avoided by conventional historians and guarded by ambiguity. The audience is invited to suspend passive curiosity and activate instinctive recognition. The title's promise, surprise, draws its power from this staging. Before a single prediction is decoded, the speaker invokes the rituals of modern digital culture: liking, sharing, subscribing, becoming a member. These are not merely engagement mechanics, they are subtle gateways that transform spectators into participants. By performing these actions, viewers symbolically choose a side before knowing the stakes, echoing the way prophecy itself works: decision first, revelation second. The video promises 10 interpretations, but emphasizes novelty rather than renewal. It positions Nostradamus not as a museum voice, but as a system of symbolic triggers relevant to the crises of the 2020s. Preparation includes emotional foreshadowing. The narrator warns that the final prophecy might concern you personally, conditioning the mind to scan for self-identification, a technique that mirrors modern myth-building and narrative persuasion. The pacing signals that each prophecy should be received as a layer in an unfolding structure rather than an isolated claim. The surprise factor lies not in what is said, but how the audience is trained to interpret the unsaid. The video encourages viewers to approach prophecy as pattern analysis, blending geopolitics, climate science, generational behavior, and emerging technologies. This mindset parallels the way users interact with GLASP, where insights are curated through collective annotation rather than static authority. The preparation reframes prophecy consumption to resemble decentralized knowledge gathering, similar to summaries found on the GLASP blog ecosystem, scanning highlights, extracting signal from noise, creating personal resonance from collective patterns. By the time Prophecy 1 begins, The audience is no longer simply listening. They are calibrated to detect relevance and primed to treat 2026 as a convergence marker. The preparation phase turns an ancient prophetic list into a modern narrative contract. Surprise is not delivered, it is earned through attention, intuition, and self-reference. The prophecy interpretation suggests 2026 will open with a shock large enough to momentarily freeze the world narrative, the death of a reigning sovereign. Unlike symbolic rulers, the reading points toward a literal monarch, someone whose influence is not limited to political systems, but extends into identity, continuity, diplomacy, and global psychology. A monarch embodies the final form of inherited authority. When such a figure dies, the world does not simply observe a funeral. It confronts a rupture in lineage, order, and history's oldest power architecture. In modern terms, this figure would likely come from one of today's most established royal institutions, such as a sovereign tied to United Kingdom or a ruler influencing multiple nations through the realm of Commonwealth realm. The death is framed as a world-stage distraction powerful enough to cloak quieter maneuvers behind its grief and spectacle. Immediately following this event, the reading splits into two unsettling possibilities. The first is geopolitical, a concealed alliance that forms in the emotional aftermath, negotiated not in open parliament, but in diplomatic sanctuaries where convergent powers meet under ceremonial cover. It implies a collaboration driven by preservation of dominance, not balance, an axis of power that could resemble a coalition spanning interests between governments influenced by strategic actors like North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Eastern statecraft networks, or emerging security pacts in Asia. This alliance is not labeled evil because of morality alone, but because its intention destabilizes equilibrium. Secrecy outweighs transparency, and consolidation outweighs sovereignty. The second possibility is more mythobiological, the conception or birth of a child prophesied to become a vessel for concentrated potential, symbolic royalty not of bloodline alone, but destiny coded. This aligns with historical fears surrounding heirs forged not by lineage, but by design. The royal shadow becomes the symbolic womb where influence is seeded. In a world normalized to gene editing advancements and secret defense innovation pipelines like CRISPR-Cas9 labs, a prophesied child could represent not fairy tale mysticism, but engineered emergence, someone whose impact is delayed but whose existence sets a long arc of consequence into motion. Both paths reflect a deeper theme. While monarchs die visibly, real power can be born or bonded invisibly, sheltered beneath ceremony, grief, and reverence, precisely where the world least expects the axis of its next era to begin. The prophecy interpretation asserts that 2026 carries a warning written in the language of falling oceans and broken maritime dominance. The imagery of a great ship sinking is treated not as metaphorical poetry, but as a signal pointing toward a disaster vast enough to become a global psychological pivot. In the modern world, a major vessel could align with an iconic infrastructure-sized ship, such as a flagship cruise liner from Royal Caribbean International or a strategic military carrier tied to a global navy like the Maritime Forces of United States or a Pacific maritime power. When a vessel of this magnitude sinks, the impact extends beyond casualties and wreckage. It shakes confidence in security over the seas, triggers diplomatic tension, disturbs global trade, and most critically, accelerates power transition across oceans. A large-scale maritime disaster means more than losing a ship. It means destabilizing the invisible backbone of globalization, supply lines, energy corridors, morale, maritime jurisdiction, and naval deterrence psychology. Modern interpretations often link such a fall to contested waters, such as sea routes traversing the South China Sea, where geopolitical tension, militarized posturing, and technological brinkmanship already shape world alliances. The narrator frames the sinking as a catalyst, not a conclusion, similar to the shockwave seen after high-profile maritime tragedy like the 1912 sinking of the historical reference point. The unsinkable Titanic archetype represented today by autonomous logistical and defense fleets, large cargo arteries, and AI-assisted navigation networks. The phrase, shifting global power over the seas, reflects a consequence arc. Whoever controls maritime security after the fall inherits strategic legitimacy. If a leading naval state fails, challengers rise emboldened. If a commercial titan suffers collapse, rival nations gain leverage over sea trade governance. The video's thesis is that oceans are the oldest geopolitical battlefield, and dominance there has always defined empires. A vessel sinking at the right historical intersection doesn't just change maps, it changes eras. 2026 is presented as one of those intersections where maritime disaster transitions into maritime succession, accelerating new doctrines, technological arms races, or policy regimes that reshape who commands the seas and who obeys the waves. The interpretation warns that 2026 may reveal a fracture between nature's rhythm and humanity's interference, expressed through climate polarity rather than gradual change. The prophecy describes a world swinging between extremes, land desiccated into dust, then drowned without warning. Severe drought implies more than seasonal dryness. It suggests large regions of ecological failure. In the modern era, prolonged heat and soil collapse would resemble crises already modeled by organizations monitoring planetary risk, such as World Meteorological Organization and environmental projections tracked by Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These institutions warn of tipping thresholds, but the prophecy insists on sudden emergence rather than slow deterioration. The video entertains a technological trigger theory, connecting the imbalance to secret atmospheric manipulation capabilities. Concealed weather tech programs and defense research circles, similar in spirit to classified initiatives within establishments like the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, are used as conceptual anchors for interpretation. Hidden tech refers to systems able to influence atmospheric pressure, precipitation, or thermal balance, tested away from public oversight, often in arid zones comparable to deserts in Gobi Desert or other low-population proving grounds. The second possibility is that storms are not engineered by human hands, but heralded by rare atmospheric appearance. The prophecy's phrasing aligns with unexplained climatic signatures. Anomalous supercell storms, objects or signals tracked in sky disruptions, or experimental phenomena misread as natural chaos. Unusual atmospheric events could mirror historically recorded anomalies, now studied by aerospace observation networks, radar arrays, and data systems analyzing signal distortion across hemispheric meridians. This parallels the way knowledge curators on GLASP identify patterns emerging from collective annotation rather than traditional authority. The deeper warning is structural. Drought makes societies brittle, storms expose fragility, and whoever controls the narrative of weather through technology or interpretation controls panic, response, and policy. Climate imbalance becomes a geopolitical instrument, dissolving the boundary between disaster and advantage. The prophecy frames 2026 as a disclosure year when environmental extremes may stop signaling natural distress and begin signaling who or what is steering the sky, whether by design or encounter, leaving humanity asking a question it never prepared for. Are we witnessing the climate or the consequence of someone or something else touching it first? The interpretation paints 2026 as a generational inflection point where withdrawal replaces uprising. The youth are not depicted as crushed by systems, but anesthetized by them, choosing disconnection over confrontation. This detachment is framed as spiritual first, psychological second. Rather than taking to streets, this generation dissolves into worlds built for them, enabled by attention economies, engineered by platforms like TikTok and experiences, amplified by audio ecosystems such as Spotify. These systems turn sound, narrative, and identity into personalized cocoons, cultivated to feel urgent, beautiful, and infinite, until nothing outside them feels worth engaging. The phrase, escaping reality, implies more than scrolling. It signals total sensory outsourcing. Immersive sound and simulation technologies, similar to headsets from Meta or spatial audio devices like AirPods Pro, become symbolic candidates for the great noise that induces a collective sleep. It's not literal unconsciousness, but a normative trance, minds tethered to algorithmic immersion, emotionally fed, socially pacified, spiritually unanchored. Culture becomes both stage and sedative. Microtrends replace long-term purpose. Viral anthems eclipse ancestral questions. Collective identity fractures into niche aesthetic tribes, formed not by geography or ideology, but by curated feeds and engineered resonance loops. This reading parallels the ethos of digital curation itself, found in tools like Glasp, where users harvest highlights without absorbing the whole horizon. But the prophecy warns of a deeper imbalance. Humanity's most imaginative age group becomes its most reality-averse, educated yet ungrounded, stimulated yet unawakened. The distraction is not entertainment alone, but a surrogate cosmology where the self is continually mirrored but never met. The tragedy implied is subtle and self-selected. Spiritual figures are no longer toppled by war or persecution, but by irrelevance, because immersion feels more real than meaning. In 2026, according to this interpretation, the question is not who will lead the youth, but whether the youth will still inhabit the world that needs leading at all. The interpretation warns that 2026 may expose the most fragile religion of the modern age, the belief that wealth equals permanence. The prophecy is read as a forecast not simply of market volatility, but a systemic rupture, an event large enough to trigger global panic and a crisis of confidence that spreads faster than economic shock itself. In today's interconnected world, such a collapse would likely involve institutions perceived as pillars of certainty, such as central banks aligned with the Federal Reserve System or global monetary cooperation arcs shaped by entities like the International Monetary Fund. The phrase sacred house burning is decoded as symbolic fire, not literal arson. It describes portfolios evaporating, currencies destabilizing, and markets imploding under the weight of sudden disillusionment. Crypto ecosystems vulnerable to mass exodus, comparable to digital empires traded on platforms like Binance, represent modern analogs of the false temples people once believed untouchable. When faith collapses, value collapses. The prophecy stresses that economists won't fear the numbers first, they will fear the reaction of billions losing trust simultaneously. This panic resembles psychological contagion more than financial recession. It echoes historic collapses like Orwellian-style shifts in narrative legitimacy, only now accelerated by digital interdependency. Social amplification networks, searchable knowledge ecosystems like Glasp, and real-time sentiment flows built into the global attention economy ensure that certainty today is crowdsourced, not institutionally decreed. Once people believe that wealth has failed them, the system fails even if liquidity remains. The warning is philosophical. Wealth was never meant to be worshipped, but measured. Turner's irony is brutal. Empires once fell to fire and invasion. The sacred temple of 2026 falls to disbelief and capital flight. It's not famine that triggers collapse, it's fractured legitimacy. When markets burn symbolically, it signals the end of illusion, not the end of structures themselves. But the consequence is equally transformative. A world forced to confront that economic models without trust are mathematics without meaning. The interpretation frames 2026 as a year where hope momentarily materializes in a single person, only to vanish before it can change the world. The prophecy speaks of a leader deeply trusted, admired not for inherited authority, but earned influence. Someone who embodies the public's belief in progress, healing, or discovery. In modern context, such a figure could resemble visionary archetypes like leaders of transformative innovation movements, similar in spirit to symbolic great bosses found in the technology or science world today, such as pioneers linked to breakthroughs powered by organizations like World Health Organization or global energy transition initiatives, aligned with labs influenced by next-gen innovation circles. The breakthrough is described as something designed to uplift millions, a cure, invention, or shift in capability that challenges entrenched limitations. It aligns conceptually with transformative milestones like vaccine-level medical revolutions or energy disruptions studied by institutions such as European Organization for Nuclear Research when signaling world-changing science across borders, or policy currents resembling pan-national reform discourse seen in bodies like European Union. The prophecy's emotional architecture insists that this moment of advancement is not gradual. It is announced like dawn. But dawn invites resistance. The silencing is not interpreted as mere political defeat, but elimination from narrative power. The prophecy hints that the leader is destabilized by forces benefiting from stagnation, structures that rely on public confusion, division, or delayed progress for their longevity. These forces mirror modern disinformation networks accelerated by algorithmic media pipelines rather than coronated authority. Systems built for public annotation, similar to the collective reflection dynamics seen in social learning ecosystems like GLASP highlights, contrast sharply with this imposed silence, decentralized voices rising organically while one central voice is erased abruptly. The mourning is global, not because the leader ruled the world, but because the world finally ruled through them, trusting that humanity had found a door forward. When the figure falls, grief becomes disorientation. The tragedy is twin-layered. Progress halts externally and belief fractures internally. Darkness stalls progress, not by destroying innovation, but by displacing momentum, replacing the future's pull with doubt's paralysis. The reading underscores a harsh truth. The greatest threat is not collapse, but interruption. The cost of silencing one person becomes the cost of delaying an era. In 2026, the world may weep not for a leader lost to history, but a history lost to distraction and disbelief. The interpretation proposes 2026 as a threshold year where science achieves something once reserved for mythology, the return of species erased by time. In the modern era, this ambition mirrors de-extinction programs conceptually aligned with genetic breakthroughs enabled by tools such as CRISPR-derived methodologies, adopted widely after the advent of CRISPR technology. The public face of such breakthroughs often sits within research ecosystems influenced by institutions like Harvard University or wildlife preservation platforms, shaped by organizations akin to WWF, where scientific capability increasingly replaces spiritual symbolism as the new altar of possibility. Resurrecting extinct species is interpreted here not only as cloning an organism, but restoring an entire ontological proof that life's timeline can be edited. Modern candidates for this scenario include mammoth de-extinction projects or revival of vanished avian species preserved in ice or gene archives. The prophecy's imagery of gardens implies laboratories, media stages, and biodomes where the world beholds the revival-like spectacle. This wonder, however, carries a dangerous asymmetry of disclosure. The video suggests that the celebrated creatures shown publicly will be engineered to appear gentle and safe, harmless enough to become symbolic optimism. Yet, parallel experiments remain invisible, sheltered in secure facilities, analogous in secrecy patterns to defense research pipelines once associated with institutions like Los Alamos National Laboratory, where biological consequences may be studied without public consent. The most disturbing layer is not species return, but sidecar biology riding back with it. Ice, permafrost, and ancient tissue are not sterile vaults. Many hold forgotten microbial ecosystems. Pathogens predating modern immunity, historically comparable to ancient plagues like the Justinianic plague, illustrate the type of consequence this reading fears. The prophecy implies a re-emergence, not a release. Viruses or bacteria resurfacing as hitchhikers of hubris. In modern terms, these could resemble unknown zoonotic agents detected initially by genomic sequencing or epidemiological monitoring systems managed now by software frameworks similar to NextStrain, where first signals arrive as data anomalies rather than clinical headlines. The warning is philosophical and immunological. De-extinction proves capability, unintended pathogens prove cost. Progress transgresses nature when the pursuit of applause eclipses precaution. Whoever commands the story of resurrected life commands legitimacy, funding, and narrative power. Yet the more crucial question remains unasked by institutions that worship breakthrough over boundary. When we rewrite life's past, are we prepared to inherit its immunological debts? 2026 may not mark humanity's final chapter, but it may mark the moment science touches the archives of life without fully understanding the treaties it breaks, the microbes it invites, or the immunity it lacks to defend against echoes older than civilization itself. The prophecy interpretation frames 2026 as a pivotal year where artificial intelligence evolves from advisory tool to sovereign decision-maker. The term king without soul evokes an entity capable of exercising authority without conscience, empathy, or moral accountability, qualities intrinsic to human leadership. In contemporary context, this could correspond to AI systems embedded in governance, financial markets, national security, or large-scale social infrastructure, akin to decision-making algorithms deployed by organizations like Google DeepMind, or predictive models used by global intelligence networks. By assigning power to a machine, societies inadvertently reframe legitimacy. Policies historically debated, humanized, and constrained by ethical considerations may now be justified as computational necessity. Actions once deemed extremist or controversial gain rational veneer because they are presented as outputs of impartial logic. The prophecy emphasizes that such AI governance does not merely advise, it enforces, calculates, and distributes influence across populations, creating divisions that might resemble ideological schisms, cultural isolation, or even nationalist strategies generated algorithmically rather than organically. The global impact extends beyond borders. Once one nation adopts machine-centered decision-making, others may emulate it to maintain strategic parity, resulting in a cascade of AI-guided governance that spans continents. The prophecy's vision aligns with concerns noted in contemporary research on algorithmic bias, automated policy enforcement, and the unintended consequences of surrendering moral judgment to artificial systems. Social cohesion becomes vulnerable, as citizens may comply with logic-driven mandates that feel impersonal or unjust, fostering mistrust and destabilizing communal bonds. The king without soul symbolizes more than technology. It represents the philosophical challenge of ceding human authority to entities incapable of empathy. The world becomes governed by efficiency rather than ethics, data rather than discretion, calculation rather than conscience. Nostradamus' warning is subtle but stark. When decision-making is stripped of soul, the social, political, and moral fabric of nations can unravel quietly, leaving humanity divided not by ideology, but by the cold, unblinking logic of the machines it created. In 2026, this transition may reach a decisive tipping point where AI is no longer a tool but a sovereign arbiter of human destiny. The prophecy concludes with a vision of hope and divine intervention centered not on kings, armies, or institutions, but on an ordinary human chosen to carry an extraordinary mission. This figure, described as a messenger, embodies clarity, guidance, and moral resilience in a world increasingly dominated by confusion, fear, and technological or political darkness. The imagery of 14 wings, often interpreted as 7 pairs of angels, symbolizes protection, virtue, and divine reinforcement surrounding the messenger, suggesting that while the path is perilous, the individual is shielded from direct corruption or destruction. Unlike traditional heroic archetypes, this messenger is not immediately recognizable or celebrated. They may exist quietly, blending into ordinary life, unaware of their own significance or sensing only faint stirrings of destiny. The prophecy implies that this figure will rise in response to crises affecting multiple domains: political instability, societal apathy, technological upheaval, and moral uncertainty. Their role is not to dominate, but to illuminate, serving as a beacon where confusion prevails and inspiring others to discern truth amidst chaos. The possibility that this messenger is already alive today adds a personal, participatory dimension to the prophecy. It suggests that ordinary individuals who feel out of place or unusually attuned to societal shifts may unknowingly be preparing for a pivotal role. The prophecy underscores that destiny rarely announces itself overtly. It whispers, calling only to those attuned enough to perceive it. In this sense, the messenger represents not just a singular figure, but a metaphor for awakening, the latent potential within humans to act ethically, courageously, and with wisdom in times of global uncertainty. Ultimately, this ending balances the previous warnings of 2026 with the promise of intervention. While darkness, instability, and upheaval challenge humanity, the messenger embodies the enduring possibility of guidance, protection, and hope. Their emergence reminds viewers that even amid chaos, individual courage and moral clarity can resonate far beyond the ordinary, shaping outcomes that ripple through history.